Hi, it's Wednesday. That means it's time for another video edition of Widower Wednesday. I'm Abel Keogh, author of Dating a Widower, and today we're going to discuss burial arrangements, specifically if you and your widower are in conflict about where your body should be laid to rest. It's something I've kind of talked about a little bit in other videos, like about cemetery visits and about wills and things like that, but I haven't really addressed it fully. There is an article on my blog where I have addressed it. I'll link to it in the comments below. But really, I wanted just to kind of discuss some of the problems and situations that arise. And by the way, I will point out this is the one issue, I always talk about issues that came up with me and Julie. This is the one issue we have not solved. We've come to a kind of truce on it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But just so you know, this is the one issue we haven't solved. So, there's reasons for that, and I'll get into those in a minute. But first, let me kind of set this up for you. Generally, this is a question that comes up once in a while, and it usually has to do with when a widower and his wife are getting serious, or his wife, or maybe his girlfriend, they're getting serious enough where they're discussing marriage, and it kind of comes up that, hey, what's going to happen to us after we're buried? And a lot of times, the widower has a cemetery plot somewhere and his late wife is buried. Often there's a double headstone there, right, with the widower's name on it, just waiting to fill in the date that he kicks the bucket. And so it kind of becomes an issue. It's like, well, where are we going to get buried? And usually the conversation goes something like this. The widower says, well, you can just get buried with me and my late wife, whatever. There's room, we can do it here. Generally, the girlfriend or the soon-to-be wife isn't so enthused about that. And they want to be buried somewhere else. Not only do they want to be buried somewhere else, they want the widower to be buried with them elsewhere. And so that's kind of the case with me and Julie. My wife and daughter are buried in a cemetery probably about 70 minutes north of where we currently live. I haven't been there in forever. It's been, I don't know, got to do the math here, 16 years, I guess, since I've been up there. I haven't been up there since the first anniversary. But Julie's been like, hey, where, I can't remember how it came up. It came up, I don't know if we were engaged or somehow it came up. She wanted to know what was going to happen when she died. And I kind of said, hey, there was a plot next to, to where, my wife Krista, or my late wife Krista has a plot. I've got a plot, one next to it. That's for you. And no. She's not going that. She doesn't want to be buried there, and she'd rather be buried elsewhere, and me buried with her. I'm like, well, why can't we all be buried together, kind of thing. Anyway, we haven't resolved it, but that's okay. We're still married. We're still happy. The truce, I guess you can kind of say that we've come to on it, is that whoever kicks the bucket first will just have to follow the wishes of the surviving spouse. That's kind of how we've come up with it. May or may not be a solution for you. But I want to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, because I think a lot of people feel that if the widower, doesn't want your wishes, or he wants to be buried with the late wife and not with you, or together or something, that he somehow doesn't love you as much or doesn't care about you as much. And I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of times it can be practical reasons. Like my first thought, when I'm thinking about, Julie being buried there as well, there's no need to buy a plot. There's plenty of space. Hey, it's easier if people want to come see me, they can see you and late wife and the entire family kind of thing. It's more of a practical reason a lot in my mind. But I see Julie's side of it is she wants kind of a place that's hers and doesn't necessarily want to be tied into that. And, I kind of get that and respect it, though I think, there's plenty of room. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I think the first thing you have to keep in mind is that where someone is buried, it's kind of really for the living. It's not for the dead. I think once you're dead, you're really not caring what happens to your body. It's not, you're standing up in heaven or whatever you believe in and looking down and, oh my gosh, they're burying me here. What are you? That's not what I wanted, kind of thing. I think by the time you've died, you've kind of moved on beyond the point of caring really what happens to your body. There's probably other things that you're concerned about or worried about or celebrating, and where your body's laid to rest is probably the very last thing. So just keep in mind it's really for the living, and that's really why we have cemeteries and things like that. Yeah, it's a place to put the dead, but the dead don't The dead don't care. It's the living in care. So I guess that's really the big reason why it really hasn't been like a make or break issue with me and Julie, is that we really believe that, I guess we're fine with it. If she kicks the bucket first, then I'm burying her up in the cemetery, in a plot up there. And if it's me that kicks the bucket, I'm sure she'll find a nice burial spot for me and get a spot up for her next to it. And well, I'll be happy. So I don't, not that it's not an important issue, but I guess I don't want you to I really don't think you should make it a make or break issue for me, or for you. This shouldn't be an issue that maybe decides whether or not, you tie the knot or not. There are issues that you should worry about. Should I really marry or get serious with this guy? What's going to happen to your bodies or get buried is not one of those issues. I don't think. And I think when it comes to this issue, the time kind of softens people's heart and changes things. I think especially if a widower is married to you and spends years and years with you, he might change his mind a little bit about where he's buried. I'm not, from my own personal thing, I've been married to Julie for 15 years as we record this, and what was kind of a bigger deal, back when we were first getting married or first discussed it, is, I don't know, not that much of a big deal to me. It's still, if she kicks the bucket first, I'm still going to do it, but it's not worth a fighting over. And who knows? You ask me in 10 years, it might just be I don't care anymore. Just do whatever you want, kind of thing. So just keep in mind that where the widower is coming from, especially if you're not married to him yet, he's still kind of mentally making a transition, right? He's still making that transition from widower to moving on to chapter 2 in his life and making you part of that life. So just keep in mind, he's probably not fully thinking about it yet. And I bet you after you get married and you ask him 5 years after you're married, his opinion may change or soften or something like that. So just because there's a headstone there, just because there's an empty plot, doesn't mean it's going to work out that way. Again, a lot of times when men think, they think in very practical terms, and it's like, well, this is already set up. Why are we worried about this kind of thing? And it's probably not as an emotional issue for the widower as it is as the girlfriend or wife of a widower, where it's maybe more symbolic to them of who he truly loves by where he's buried. And for widowers, it's just, I don't know, it's a little more practical. So just kind of understand maybe some of the psychology about where they're coming from. Now, the one thing I will say, though, is, check my notes here, is that if it is important to you where you're buried or where the widower is buried and you want some say about it, the first thing I'm going to suggest is get married, because once you're married, you can have some say over that, right? If you're just a girlfriend and you've been putting this off and he kicks the bucket, well, good luck. Odds are, unless he specifically directed it in some kind of will or legal document, you're not going to have a say. So the first thing is to go ahead and get married and enjoy marriage. And one of the fruits of marriage is generally you get to pick where where your husband or wife or your spouse or whatever is ultimately buried, or where the ashes are scattered, things like that. Now, the other thing I would suggest is that if it's really important what happens to your body anyway, if you're very adamant that you want to be buried here, or that you want your body to be cremated, or that you want something else going on, I highly suggest that you put it in writing, put it in a will or legal document, something that again might stand up and the design. If you're really insistent that you don't want to be buried with the widower and his late wife, for example, then put it in a binding legal document that, hey, when I die, I want to be buried here. This is what I want to do with my body, whatever. I want to donate to science. I want to be cremated. There's no really right or wrong answer what you want done with your body. But if there is something specific you do not want to happen to it, I do advise that you put it in some kind of legal document or will or directive or whatever your state or country is going to recognize. And then at that point, if the widower wants to bury you with he and the late wife, it's not gonna happen, kind of thing. So anyway, so that's really my advice when it comes to where to bury the second wife. I think it's an important issue, but it's not one that you should make or break your relationship with a widower on. And I think if it's truly important, I think if you just get married and spend some time with that person, times change, hearts change. You know, in the end, it doesn't matter. You're not going to care where you're buried. But if it is important to you, if it is, you know, at least what happens to you, I don't know what's going to happen to the a widower, but if it's important to you, put it in writing, put it in a legal document that you know that you can, you know, that your wishes, you know, that your wishes according to whatever you want done with your body will be done. So anyway, again, discuss it out, but really don't make a mountain out of it. It is not that important. What's more important than where you're buried is how you're living your life and the life you have with the a widower. Because really, what's going to happen is when people go to your grave, and no matter where you're buried, they're going to talk about you and the good memories they have with you. And if you want them to have good memories, you want them to have loving memories, you want them to miss you. And you know, if you're making a big deal out of nothing, that's really what people are going to remember. And odds are they won't visit your grave anyway. So you know, really focus your energy on making a good relationship, making a solid relationship, making it a loving relationship with a widower. If he has kids, making a loving relationship with them. You know, it's life is about the living. It's not about the dead. It's not about where we're buried. It's about what we do in this life. And honestly, we get one shot at it. We get one shot to make things right. We get one shot to, you know, to make our mark on society, on our family, on our friends, or whatever. Don't get a second chance at this. And so focus on what's important and what matters, and that is living and loving and being kind. I'm Abel Keogh, author of Dating a Widower. Go ahead, feel free and subscribe. Feel free to watch another a video as well. If you have some thoughts or issues on this that I haven't covered, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I'm Abel Keogh, and I'll see you next Wednesday.